be in a space where they are sitting down and making plans on where they want to go. Because the business owners or supervisors or managers, CEOs, they need to make sure that there is a performance management system in place so that people know from day one, when a person comes and joins an institution, what is it that the employer will be looking at during the time of probation? What is it that the employer will be looking at beyond probation? Do you have some targets that they're working towards so that as the person is working in a particular institution, then they know that if I perform this way, I get to keep my job, or I get to get this promotion, I get to get this reward and things of that nature, so that employees have something that they are looking forward to.
Right. When it comes to performance management, we know that it benefits more on the employees. But how does it also benefit the employers and maybe an overall of an organization?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to performance management, one of the things that we say is that you have employees. Once an employee joins an institution, the advantage that to be there when there's proper way that they're being managed, then the people feel they are contributing to something, and that is very motivating for them. And it also provides an environment in which people know that here, as long as you are a performer, you get to stay. If somebody cannot perform, remember what we talked about in the last episode, that even the law under Section 52 provides that the employee's contract can be terminated if they are failing to perform or their behavior is not in line with the requirements of the institution or the company. What this then means is that on the part of the employee, they will understand what is expected of them. That's why it's advantageous. On the part of the employer, it comes with a lot of benefits. If we talk about big institutions, for the bigger institutions that have been there for a long time, as we did mention in the last episode, normally you have an institution with a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, they are indicating what will be achieved every year, maybe in the next 3 years or next 5 years. So by you having that performance management in place, it then helps the institution, such big institutions, to start working towards achievement of those targets. And so it also helps to align the efforts of every department, the efforts of every employee, so that everybody is working towards the achievement of the company goals. When you look at our colleagues who are doing, the small and medium enterprises, the business owners who are just starting off, even for them, it's important that they sit down and have some form of performance management in place. Why that is important is that for instance, when we deal with colleagues in the SMEs, when the person is starting their business, the entrepreneurs, sometimes it's just a person is alone. They have all the ideas of how they want to operate. They are the ones who know when they will be waking up. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, you find that they are even working late hours and so on, because that is their business. They have the passion. But the moment you bring in another person, and another person, and another person, you have maybe 3, 4, 5 people that are working with you. Those individuals have their own desires and aspirations. So then it becomes necessary for this business owner to make sure that the people that they are assembling, the team that the entrepreneur is assembling, the team can be well managed. That is why it becomes important for the business owner to actually make things clear in terms of what he or she wants to start achieving as a business owner, and then how each one of those people will be working. And again, everything should be done within the laws of the country. So you have to look at the hours of work, what they should be paid, and what kind of targets. And it also makes it very good for the employers when things are very clear. Because some of the things that start to happen, for instance, if the targets are not clear, the time that you as a business owner or a manager or a supervisor or HR wakes up and say, this guy is not good for us, that will become difficult if you didn't make things clear to them on what they should be working towards in terms of their targets.
Amazing. When it comes to performance management, I believe communication is very important. Could you also take us through the key components, starting with the target settings?
Yeah, so when it comes to communication, really you need to be in a space where, like I mentioned, for the big companies that have strategic plans, they need to make sure that the CEO of the company need to make sure that him or her, with entire management and the team, they are galvanizing everybody's efforts towards the achievement of those goals. And that is where communication becomes extremely important. Because if management is not communicating to the employees, then you have a document, and we see this, where you have these very fancy strategic plans and they're just gathering dust because there is no attachment in terms of what needs to be done at each stage by each department. So the communication becomes extremely important. The same thing applies to small and medium enterprises. You're a business owner, you want to communicate where you want to go with your business so that the people then can start buying into that idea. Even when they are working, they know I'm contributing to our company growing or business growing, and this is how we'll be rewarded. So as then the business owner or the managers are communicating, it's important that there is some level of thinking around the performance targets. Now, you will find that a lot of times people just talk about appraisals. I will tell you that one of the most difficult parts is actually setting the targets. Why the target setting is such a difficult thing? It's because sometimes people, either management does not know how they should actually be setting the targets. Sometimes it's a matter of what kind of targets should they be looking at. So that exercise, if it can be done internally, management should do that. It's usually advisable that you have these targets set for the full year. You will look at your performance. If the company has been operating for some time, there's a time that the company sits down, management will sit down and look at what have we done so far and where should we be going. So you now start setting the targets. Now, those targets, like we did mention in the previous episodes, you look at the corporate objectives, then you start breaking them down. Now, when you break it down to a department, let's say we want to make X amount of money this year. Now, who is going to do what? So you are now breaking these things to per department, then you are also looking at now from the departmental level to the individual. Mm-hmm. The very difficult part is breaking that target to that individual. And we will explain to you why. When you look at certain jobs, like if you're in construction, or maybe the job is to maybe build a house or something like that, those things, they're like tangible. You can see them. If they said, by week 1, you need to make sure that in the first week or second week, we want to see the foundation, then you're starting to build, that becomes easy for you to even monitor and say, okay, we are working towards achieving our targets. Now, when it comes to certain jobs, like professional jobs, where somebody works with a computer, for instance, it becomes a very difficult thing. And that's why supervisors and managers and HR, they need to understand how exactly will they come up with the objectives or targets. And those targets, they need to meet the SMART criteria. We're talking about the basic things here. These targets should be very specific. So it's important to look at the targets that are being set. You shouldn't be all over the place, because remember, if your target is not clear, then at the time of appraisal, it becomes very difficult. Then you should be able to now say, this target we are setting, how are we going to measure it? So if we are talking of a presenter, what will be the target for the presenter? If you're talking about an accountant who sits in the office, what will be the target for the year or for every month? What are the key targets they should be given? An HR person or an analyst or an engineer. So even if it's a driver, even a cleaner, you should be sitting and saying, what targets should we give them? And they should be realistic targets. Because sometimes we see this in companies where they come up with all sorts of targets just to tick a box that, no, we gave some targets. No, you need to sit down and look at the level of the company or the person themselves. What are we trying to do? Are these targets we are setting very specific? Can we actually measure them? The measurement part, again, this is where you get the consultants to sit with you where you have a challenge, so that they help you to create targets that you can actually measure, because then it makes it easier for you as a business owner and the employee to know that when I achieve X, Y, I then make this kind of progress. Okay? Then, are those targets, yes, they are measurable, can they also be attainable? You look at all the resources that you have, you look at the kind of institution you have, all those things need to be taken into consideration. If you tell someone, just as an example, you're in Lusaka, I need you to be in Kitwe in 3 hours. Okay, that's a target you have given the person. But is that even practical, given if they are going to use the road? Maybe if they are going to fly. Which means if you're looking at a particular target, you should also be looking at what kind of resources are you going to provide as an institution for this person to make sure that they can actually achieve what you're telling them. If you have a project, you say, we need you to deliver this project at such and such a time. What resources have you given them in terms of people, in terms of the money, materials, and so on. So there has to be a space where you really sit down and interrogate the targets you're setting as the supervisor to make sure that they meet the criteria and the time when everything will be done. Because it becomes important, and we emphasize this part because when it comes to the time of appraisal, it should be less of discussion. It is an issue of, you are told, we agreed that you are going to do X, Y, Z on such and such a time, or using such resources. So the appraisal time, at the time it comes, it should be an easier conversation if you set the targets right at the beginning. So this aspect we emphasize on setting the targets. It's an aspect that a lot of supervisors and employees actually run away from. And you see it at the very end when the appraisals come. The focus now is really just on behavioral issues. Remember, the law has given us to look at performance and behavior. A lot of times people will simply now set up targets which maybe are focused on just behavioral aspects. Is Patricia, does she come on time? Does she smile? Is she cooking good to all the other staff? But at the end of the day, all those behavioral things should be adding to you achieving the major targets that you are given, which are in line with the company target. So that part I should emphasize that target setting should be the biggest focus and not just the appraisals that people like to talk about. It is about setting the right targets, and those targets should be made in such a manner that they are attainable and the person can work and achieve them. Otherwise, if they are too high, it becomes it's demoralizing for the person because they know they will not achieve it. Again, if the targets are too low, you now end up with an aspect of over-achievement. And then you have people saying, no, we did very well this year. But what they have achieved is really because the targets that were set were very low. Yeah, and that has an impact when we talk about the reward system. Because sometimes if you set targets which are too low, then everybody gets 100% and then it comes at a cost.
Well explained, Mr. Kabanda. If you're just joining us, you're watching Labour Matters on KBN TV live on our Facebook page. You can drop us your comments and contributions. You can also use the number which is right on your TV screen. If you're wondering who the person I am with on set right now, I am with Mr. Owen Katongo Kabanda, who is a management advisor. And Mr. Katongo, we know that training plays a pivotal role in development, but how can training also be integrated into performance management?
Yeah, so one of the things that get to happen is that whenever you sit down as an institution or as a business and you then set the targets that need to be achieved, it's important that you are looking at how the people that you have are actually going to achieve those targets. And sometimes what starts to happen is that you need to then create an avenue through which they can be empowered. There are two things that we always emphasize when it comes to performance. As a company, as a business, as HR, as a supervisor, manager, or CEO, there is need to look at what problems will the employees have when it comes to these employees actually achieving these targets that you want to achieve as a business. Is it a capacity issue or is it an attitude issue? Two things. Now, why we like to separate these two things? A person who has a capacity issue, they are unable to achieve maybe certain things, or they are unable to, maybe you give them some work, but they are not giving that work in terms of how you are expecting the work to be done. Probably they are lacking capacity. It is not the end of the world. Sometimes you can then invest in training them. The trainings can take so many forms. They could be coaching, where supervisors should take responsibility and start, coaching the person, helping them to improve in the areas that that person needs to improve in. The supervisors can also work with the HR department, where now you can bring in, the trainings can be done in-house with the various people, depending on the skill or the actual knowledge or skill that you want to impart in this person. Sometimes you bring in external trainers, so you go to this training institution or a consulting firm, then they come into the company, they start to do the training for the people. So it could be, I don't know if it's Excel or PowerPoint or some analysis you want to do, or the operators, there's a new machine that you have brought on board and they need to be trained. The key issue is, if you want people to perform in a certain way, it's important that you help them. And based on, of course, we know that trainings come at a cost, and that's why it's important for the institution to look at what exactly will it offer in terms of the training. Sometimes it's an aspect of sending the employees. They could be sent as a group for further trainings. Sometimes as individuals. It could be over a 2-day program, or sometimes it's months. So again, you have to then start balancing the needs in terms of the operational needs, meaning if you are going to send people for a training course which lasts for 6 months, how will that impact on the operations of the business? What time will those people be in training? So there is need for all these things to be considered as a business, so that as people are being empowered with knowledge and skills that they need to deliver, it is also not entirely killing the operations. Because if you find that you go into a company and they tell you, no, everybody is out here on training. If you're in business and you're trying to make profits, then that becomes a challenge.
Mr. Okay? Katongo, and there's a situation where even after sending people for training and whatnot, they will still not perform well. So how should an organization address such situations where, in as much as you try to invest in your employees, they still can't perform to your expectations?
Yeah, definitely. Like I did mention actually, that sometimes employers have to actually spend time to understand what they're dealing with. Is it a capacity issue? Is it an attitude issue? Usually with capacity, you could help the person to improve. There are also trainings that are done to help people change their attitudes. Sometimes what you are fighting with is really a cultural issue or an attitude issue, where somebody, because they have been in a particular company maybe for so long, they just believe they're untouchable. Nobody should tell them what to do. They will do work at their own pace. So even when it comes to reporting for work, the person comes at the time they want. You tell them, can I have this is done by such and such a time? They will give you things at the time they so wish. So sometimes from the supervisor's perspective, it's important to clearly understand what are the things that are at play here. Is it a capacity issue or attitude issue? And you, as a business and the supervisor, for instance, there's need to see how then that person can be helped. If you see that you send the person even for some training or some coaching, but they are not just changing, maybe it's high time you start thinking about what other mechanisms you can now activate in terms of disciplinary issues. And that's why we are talking about issues of making your targets to be very clear. If you have said to this person, if it is in the farm, for instance, it's straightforward, dig 10 holes per day, I don't know, or water the plants like this, or it's in a mine, we need you to dig X up to such and such a period, a target. Even for professional jobs, If you need someone to produce a report of a certain quality, make things very clear to them. And at a certain time, so you could be looking at quality, time, quantities, and so on. So there's a lot of work that actually goes in when it comes to setting the targets. And that's why we're emphasizing, if you have set the targets which are very clear, they are attainable, you have provided the resources, and the person cannot just do the work. At that point, it is what we have been talking about in the past episodes. You then can go through the disciplinary process. Because now you are saying, Bwana, we have really tried. And nothing personal here. You start charging them. They will exculpate themselves. They will go for those case hearings we have talked about. They have the right, if they are found guilty, they could be dismissed, summarily. If they appeal, again, that is their right. They will appeal, there will be an appeals committee. If the committee finds that what the disciplinary committee did was okay, the person will still remain dismissed, unless the appeals committee changes the decision that was made by the lower body, the disciplinary committee. So it's important that things are made very, very clear, so that even when it comes to that worst case scenario of having to separate with an employee, it is nothing personal, it's about the work. Mm-hmm. And that's why we emphasize to supervisors and managers that don't take things personal. There are times when people start to use a lot of emotions. It's not about, I like this one, I don't like them. It's about, can they actually perform and behave in line with the requirements of the institution? Not your personal issues that you are bringing from outside, where you are drinking or where you stay in the community. It's about work, and if the person can actually perform or behave in line with the requirements of the institution.
Well explained. Maybe we can now talk about rewarding good performance. We know that this can boost good morals to employees, but how can our organizations effectively reward employees?
Well, when it comes to performance management, like we said at the beginning, so you have a situation where you look at where the institution is going, and that's why this aspect of managing institutions and businesses is very, very critical, because you should then have a situation where you have a performance management system in place, which helps you to link with a reward system. So, and these are two totally different things. On the performance side, we are now saying this is where we want to go as a business, this is where we want to go in terms of this year and the next year and so on. So you have your strategic plan or your strategic direction. Then from there, you are now, like we said, you are breaking down according to departments and individuals and so on. So now, if you didn't set the proper targets, like we said, now you have a situation where 2 things could happen or 3 things could happen. You have a team, a group of people who have overperformed because the targets were wrongly set, or they have underperformed because the targets were wrongly set also, or they have not been given the resources. So this is why now when it comes to how you reward the people, you start looking at what is it that they needed to achieve versus what they have achieved. So now you're doing an assessment. In doing an assessment now, it's a matter of looking at both the performance-related targets as well as the behavioral side. We always emphasize the balancing of the two, because sometimes you find that in institutions where you are doing appraisals, like I mentioned at the very beginning, you have a situation where the appraisals are only focusing on behavioral issues. What time does this person report? They report very early. Tick, tick, very good marks out of 100. Now, reporting is just a component. You are reporting to come and do the work. There are people who could report very early or on time or whatever it is. But remember last time we talked about presentism. The person is there, but are they actually working? That's the issue. Are they being productive? There are also people who are extremely busy. Check what they are busy with. Nobody knows. So it's a matter of, that's why when it comes to rewards, you need to be very careful that the things that you are doing on this side in terms of performance targets as an institution, as a business, you are saying, here, if you make X amount of sale, let's say you are into sales, that's your business, or whatever it is that you do, if we achieve this, this is what we're going to get you to be rewarded with. So setting the right targets helps you with the rewarding side of things. In terms of rewards, there are different types that could be there. Some companies use what is called the notch salary increment. So what that means is that there will be already a salary structure. So again, this is why we talk to the businesses that they need to put in place a lot of structures. Running a business, when it comes to HR matters, there's a lot of work. You have to have your organization structure so everybody knows who reports to who. Then you have your job grading structure to help you to know who is at this level, a senior, manager, and so on. Then you have a salary structure. Salary structure also shows you that the entry salary for this grade is this, maximum is that. And so within that salary structure now, that's where you have those notches. So you can have a salary structure which shows you that you can have an entry salary of 5,000, it goes all the way up to 10,000. So now between 5 and 10,000, you have notches, the salary notches. So those are the ones where if you perform very well at a particular percentage that has been put, maybe, I don't know, 70%, 80%, depending on your business, you get that salary increment, okay? In some businesses, that is just one way. Another way is where you have the incentive or bonus scheme. So what happens there is that you are now saying, if we achieve X amount, this is what gets to be shared with the employees, which could be done, for instance, on a monthly basis, or it could be done on a quarterly basis. After every 3 months, the management will review the performance of the business. And that's why there has to be some level of seriousness in terms of what is being set in terms of targets versus what is actually now sitting on your books. Mm-hmm. Because if you got it wrong on the type of targets that were being given, like I said, now you have a situation when it comes to reward, where you have a guy who just did very little, but because the targets were wrong, they have now 100%. And on this side of reward system, you need to give them. So there are those things that are done in terms of rewards. The other companies use various incentive schemes where they can give you vouchers if you perform up to such a level. Others, they give other benefits, take you for holidays and so on. So the key issue is that the reward system need to also be very clear so that the employee this side understands that if I perform like this, I'll get this. Now, when it comes to rewards, it's not just the actual monetary form. Sometimes it's just even in those, there's no money involved, but just a thank you, mm-hmm. some recognition awards. Yeah. You see in some of these places where they put employee of the month, employee of the year, or whatever it is that they were doing. Maybe if they have achieved safety hours, they have achieved X amount. So sometimes it's also where you just bring together the team. We have some celebrations. So there is a lot that can be done, both in terms of monetary incentives as well as non-monetary ones. The key issue is to make sure that the team is motivated. We have to remember that when it comes to performance management, we have to always remember that we are dealing with employees who have thoughts and they have feelings. And because the employees have thoughts and feelings, it means you need to create an environment in which they are working very well, they are feeling supported, mm-hmm. and they are also getting the recognition that they need. Because remember, just from childhood, you know, the child is trying to crawl, as parents, you are there, hey, good job. And you are praising the child and they are growing just like that. So every human being grows up desiring and being happy when they are praised, or their efforts are recognized. And that's why it becomes important in businesses, even as a business owner, when your employees have done a good job, recognize. When they have not done something, okay, you can also let them know.
Well, this is quite an amazing topic, I must make mention. But under a minute, Mr. Katongo, how do we ensure that employees stay on track and meet some of the targets that you've just highlighted?
Yeah, so the key issue is really, like we said, that at some point during this interview, it's just to make sure that supervisors understand their role. And that's why it's important that even managers and supervisors also undergo training for them to understand their role in performance management. You cannot be an absent supervisor, you know, like they say, absent landlord. At the beginning of the year, you give the targets and you are walking away. You are in your nice office there, and you can't even check what is happening with the staff, it cannot be like that. But again, you have to have a balance. It is also not micromanagement